Imagine you've got that next campaign around the bend, or even if not a whole campaign, maybe the next season of your campaign, or perhaps the next arc, but what are you going to do? Your dragons have been dungeons, your liches are on layaway, and don't even get me started on how your beholder bumped his head on his bed and won't wake up till morning. Now, that's gonna be a problem. Beholders, for those who don't know, sort of dream things into creation. I'll have to call in a few adventuring parties to take care of the crowd control for that guy, but I digress. What are you going to do? Well, the same thing you always do. You put the power nearing that of the gods themselves on the game board, and see how your story unfolds. Allow me to interest you in my artifact yard sale of general world building and fantasy TTRPG advice of sorts for this fine evening of magical musings. Because for those who are unaware, I am the creative magpie, and what are magpies good for if not collecting nice little shiny things? But the nest is getting full and the wife says I gotta make some space, so if you want to muse over some tropes, themes, usages, and world building, how about we get this show underway? What do I mean by artifacts? Well, for the sake of this video, I think a wholly unique, named magical item. Something that cannot be mass-produced, though it might have been a part of a set or a series. However, for the sake of a lot of these cases, I think it's really important to understand the importance of them as plot devices, which are really ingrained in how unique the experience, power, or abilities of owning them truly is. Now, artifacts can take countless forms. We can talk about books, armor, weapons, feathers, body parts, or anything the mind can truly imagine. But why am I talking to you about them? Frankly, because I love them as elements of stories, and I think they're criminally underused despite the fact that they are similar to what I talked about in my last video in regards to making deals. Allow your players to be storytellers. Allow them to unlock some silly opportunities for stories beyond their level or weight class. Not to mention, make a dynamic and compelling enough artifact, and owning it, mastering it, or destroying it can not just be session prep, not just a mini-arc, but a whole campaign. Or series of campaigns, if you really give yourself that bit of inspiration and drive to navigate stories that way. Let's get into talking about some of the different groups and types of artifacts as I see them. First and foremost, one of the probably most abundant is most routinely inserted into a story I shall label whoever shall be worthy. Because at the end of the day, we're looking for heaping helpings of terms and conditions. Most levels of magic that make up these devices and instruments are only able to be interfaced with by someone who has their soul in sync with the desires and affinity of the item in question. Your most obvious connections would be Excalibur or Mjolnir. However, there's plenty of other ones. I mean, this video could be me typing out just thousands of examples, so I will try and refrain from listing too abundantly. But think about how the One Ring, if Samwise wasn't able to carry Frodo, who just happened to be the current owner of the ring, then the story wouldn't have had a happy ending. So the One Ring needed to be held by someone who wouldn't be easily corrupted or tempted by the ring. And Frodo didn't do too bad taking some of the mental damage for Sam the whole journey, though, he almost screwed it up a couple times. Another instance in ways to interpret things as they come is from the superhero cartoon Young Justice, Season 1, Episode 18, Secrets, to be specific. In the episode, the Sword of Beowulf is sought after, the magical blade of the legendary hero of mythos. Cool, I'm here for it. But it is known that only someone that is true of heart can wield the sword. However, as it is brought up by the villain, it says nothing about pure good or pure evil. Merely a pure heart. I think that's important. Make your artifacts something anyone can and should reasonably want. Worthiness does not have to become from altruistic justice motivated by goodness and just general hero vibes. Though if you create a set of items, i.e. the Book of Exalted Deeds or the Book of Vile Dorkness, then I'd say the moral alignment speaks for itself. Though perhaps there's incredible power in a soul that's able to exert their will and defy the nature of this artifact. A villain so vile they pervert the exalted deeds, a hero so giga-chadly heroic that they vile dorkness becomes vile, I don't know, a tax write-off? Tax evasion? Is that Tax evasion good, but what is the biggest problem when introducing a tester measure of worthiness into your artifacts that you've designed for your players? Well, if no one in your party is worthy, okay, we can work with that. They're not capable hosts of wielding the instrument, but that's not the point. They need to see it safely delivered, or destroyed, kept out of the hands of great destroyers who would inflict ruin upon the society with it. Think the Lord of the Rings, but without Samwise. Or another alternative is, break it. Yeah, you heard me. Take that sword, smash it over a rock. And then you're not dealing with whoever shall be worthy shall wield the power of Thor, whereas 99% of characters get pinned and can't budge from the hammer, but instead you're dealing with a fractured and fragmented magic, powerful and depending, but perhaps the pieces are easier to appease. And though the pieces all came from the sword, there's no saying that they can't be embedded into a shield or an amulet, forged into something different. The edge of an axe? Each party member wielding a piece of a legendary sword that allows them all to experience the general amplification. That way, no one is going into a piece of the action without a piece of the action. Now, this would be where I'd tell you all the wonderful ideas of using artifacts in your stories, but I'm afraid I've had to make some decisions in the formatting and executions of this particular essay, so I'll have to stay tuned to hear the lion's share of different ideas. But one thing I do want to make clear, as I know I didn't end up mentioning it in the script, but I do want to mention it with whoever shall be worthy, is you also have tools, weapons, like Samehara from Naruto, in which it's a living sword that determines, do they want a piece of this, yes or no? And then from there, you can also play with weapons, artifacts being characters. But back on to the script. But beyond whoever may be worthy, I should, at the very least, keep this adventuring turning by introducing my next subject. This next group, I think, is an overall symbol of artifacts of great importance, and that's the connection to a higher power. The One Ring was a test of worthiness in its tempting and corruptive nature, but something else to keep in mind is that the One Ring to rule them all gives a higher domain and dominion over the exact nature of the ring. Now, I do want to draw perhaps a more focused lens onto an assortment of trinkets and baubles, because this group should undeniably be linked to someone or something. Let's rapid fire through some concepts right quick. The Death Note is only accessible to someone who has come across the notebook of a Shinigami. I tend to be quite cross with my gods whenever they go around leaving their tools in the worlds of mortals for them to just stumble across, but at the very least it provides good tension and narrative. Next up, probably one of my most favorites, the Helmet of Naboo, or the tried and true tool of Dr. Fate. Now, some adaptations and versions, the helmet is seen as a tool of worthiness as well if Naboo wishes to reject the person putting on the helmet, but that's entirely going to be a preference of your own storytelling and design. I'd hesitate for any artifact to wholly take over the consciousness and actions of a player unless the story really weighs in on the importance of that action, and the player making the choice really understands its implications. And in these instances, also, let the player have the toolkit, but give the player instructions. Remind the player that they are playing a different character right now, but don't just make someone sit and scroll on their phone for hours of combat. However, a magical amp that connects you straight to a character that is well beyond level 20 is certainly another artifact of great discussion. Thor's hammer, as portrayed in the Marvel Universe, is wholly a test of worthiness. I mean, the naming convention for that last group quite literally comes from the quote, "Whoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor." But the artifact also connects the wielder to the power of Thor. You know, the Thunderer? That's a higher power, so it fits here too. All of this to say, I hope you're picking up what I'm laying down. Expect crossover, and don't think that any of this is gonna be as easily defined and labeled into groups. My last examples for higher power connections, I want to be different from the others. Naboo, Thor, the Shinigami, what are all three of those? Gods, in their own worlds and universes. But what about two not so godly gods? Technically speaking anyways, because I think I could use Godzilla cells, the various many parts of Godzilla franchise, and use Hashirama cells as a fix-all and general power boost in the Naruto world, and both of those are explorations of connections to much higher powers. To conclude my funny haha, Hashirama, for those who don't know, is also referred to as the God of Shinobi. However, Hashirama and Goji aren't higher omniscient beings by any means. They just sort of are the end-all be-all powers in their universes. Now, my caveat with this example is do not engage with it recklessly, because frankly, that's where a lot of this can become very messy or lazy quickly. Godzilla cells were sought after and used to explain away a couple of different monster encounters, and probably more offensively used, or Hashirama cells were used to, just do way too much. Hashirama did not even have enough cells to justify all of the things that ended up becoming him in the series, but I digress. Feel free to introduce the cells or the byproducts of monsters, creatures, or genetically unique NPCs, but ensure you do not overindulge. A few thoughts come off the dome. Hydras and trolls both have regenerative properties that might result in some science horror fantasy, indulge in mutations, or even possibly body horror science experiments, as various agendas for immortality are pursued throughout a setting. Or perhaps a certain mage or even a lich is able to absorb the magic of the natural world around them, and carving and grafting parts of magical bodies onto the body of another mage that grants them a facsimile of that legendary power. Sort of makes me think of The Witch and the Beast, which has some really neat world building, but the most relevant part right now was a forbidden instrument known as the Demon's Hand, known as Demon Hand Ishlingen, which has the flesh of 17 different kings sewn together, imbuing the wielder with incredible mind control capabilities. This collection of kings is as nice a segue as any to our next group, so I really shouldn't keep you all waiting. After all, it should be worth the thought, are we gonna catch them all? This next group of artifacts is just the sum of its parts. We got a lot that can go into any of these. You know I gotta tie it back into what I said earlier about breaking the magical sword into pieces and using them, then here is where I tell you the exact magical sword that can also reform itself into an incredibly weapon of mass destruction wielded by one person. It's sort of your Voltron Megazord sort of power-up, right? But we probably aren't handing out giant robots in your D&D campaigns, even though you should, because chicks dig giant robots. But let's look at more small-scaled artifacts, alright? A few weeks, if not months ago, on the Patreon, I made a post about the musings of an alien device that did what it did. It stuck itself upon his wrist with secrets that it hid, and now he's got superpowers. He's no ordinary kid, he's Ben 10. Yes, the Omnitrix is genuinely one of the biggest reasons this video was sitting in the backlog, being moved to the front burner for cooking, because I've been in my rediscovering phase and engaging with things that I loved in my youth, and in the last year, I definitely reignited my love for Naruto. This year, it's probably going to be Ben 10. And I'll make them all your problems. However, how is the Omnitrix a worthy artifact to talk about? Easy. Imagine in a D&D campaign where one of the characters is just a civilian, but they are granted a magical artifact that allows them to transform into 10 different fantasy creatures. A beholder, a dragon, the mighty Flump. The potential is boundless. There's actually a lot of artists out there that do fantasy Ben 10 AU kind of stuff, so if you're curious, take a look into it. It'll be rich for inspiration, but for my take in a more world-unique recreation of an Omnitrix-adjacent device, I'll have to implore you to check out my Patreon, where there's plenty of free goodies, some paid goodies, and the most expensive goodies are kinda just pictures of my wonderful pets. But without bogging too much of this video up, if a world-building creation tethered to this video is very likely free unless I checked the wrong box while making a post. If it's locked behind another tier, that's just extra fluff done for paid members. But you're here for artifacts. What other artifacts have we come up with? I don't know. Ever heard of the Infinity Gauntlet? That's a collectathon of an artifact. The Dragon Balls might need to be a full set for them to be their best selves. Why would you strive for these to frankly be more troublesome artifacts? Because you only have to grab Excalibur once. You only have to wield M. Bison's G-string once. And then you have the powers that come along with it. Or do you? Because whether the weather is worthiness, or whether the weather is winning, through the connection to a higher power, both of these roads come with terms and conditions, and the weather is certainly inclement. You cannot lift the sword from the stone, the hammer from the ground, or wield the countless artifacts of divine-level beings if you don't meet their parameters. And if you become twisted and corrupt, there's every possibility that these things begin to revoke your right to wield such magics. And then you've been hooked up to a city generator's worth of magic without your rubber gloves on. The sum of its parts, however, those often give you powers on par with the gods of a setting, sometimes even beyond them, but without the safety, no training wheels, no terms and conditions beyond whatever it takes to properly assemble them. That's the key take here. This is one of the most race to absolute power without absolute oversight from some sort of aspect of an artifact. It can be great and powerful in pieces, just less powerful than the whole. Sometimes, anyways. I mean, each Infinity Stone is a powerful enough artifact on its own right. Even independent playlists of aliens in the Omnitrix are exceptional and capable of making a 10-year-old child into a superhero. But I do have to say, having one Dragon Ball doesn't do anything but make you a target for people who want all of the Dragon Balls. However, I think that's a good chance for us to chat about the final group, and then we can move on to what I tell you all to do with all of this information. We have moral measures, handoffs of higher powers, puzzles of artifacts. What's left? Well, if you look at any and all of these, consider making them nasty, a little rotten, yes. Let's talk about corrupt artifacts. Now, full disclosure, Overly Sarcastic Productions has an excellent video on corrupt artifacts in their Trope Talk series that I heavily encourage you to watch after this video, or after you watch every single one of my videos. I have a playlist for you. Like the talking sword makes you when you quench it with blood. Jokes aside, there's a lot that can be gone into with corrupt artifacts, but largely for the purposes of my video, I want you to think about them as anything with a little grit, a little twist, the temptation and drive to do more or other than what you want for the cost of the power. Corrupting forces can sometimes be easier to come by because, frankly, they need to be available to corrupt and consume. I think a fairly iconic corrupting force is the One Ring, but I think I've talked enough about an artifact that I honestly have middling opinions and view on. So, what else do I have here? Grog has a cursed sword. Craven Edge, the cost of sleep and inflicting exhaustion to grant uncapped strength potential, pushing Grog to a state of vulnerability, getting his soul and strength a little closer to death, the monkey paw sort of effect, something that's really in play with cursed items. You have the benefits and the strengths of the cursed items gifts, but they also come with that cost. The Necronomicon will let you bring people back to life, but at cost. A very big cost. I don't think I need to beat the dead horse on cursed magical items. They're artifacts just as powerful, but oftentimes have downsides in their usage. A few dings to the credit score, probably gonna step on a Lego, or any number of bad things. But that leads us all towards the last leg of this yard sale, the bargaining phase. What are you gonna do with all of them? I don't mean to sell this short. I think a good artifact can write a whole campaign. The creation of an artifact can be something that draws a whole world into it. The discovery of something that was thought forever lost long ago. The arrival of something from another world or dimension. A new challenger approaches, sort of thing. But now all the powers that be turn and look. If you're in a sci-fi setting, you can have people traveling across whole planets or solar systems looking for them. Fantasy settings have wizards scrying, war leaders campaigning, and liches coming out of their crusty, dusty holes to find whatever magical trinket got introduced to the world. Oh, liches and artifacts? You want me to talk about Vecna and his old eye in hand. If I have lukewarm opinions on the One Ring, I might just come across as a little spicy to start talking about Wizards of the Coast's biggest wasted potential. But outside of Vecna himself and his loser state of being, the eye of a powerful being is undeniably a cool artifact. I think of how much of the plot of Naruto revolves around the who requires and is in the presence and possession of the Rinnegan. And until Madara awakens his, and Sasuke awakens his, and it's just the same two sets of eyes being passed around. Madara gives Nagato, Obito takes from Nagato. Really, eyes are passed around in Naruto. And yeah, body parts can count as artifacts. Hands, we already touched on the Witch and the Beast, and you can find any cornerstone important characters in your world and find a way of cutting off a piece of them. In real-world history, pieces of saints' bodies were kept as charms, trinkets, and artifacts of good luck and channeling divinity. But I think about the pieces of people. Whenever a hero or even a BBEG dies, what do you do with the body? Isn't that a resource now? I mean, sure, the cleric or the gods of death and the holiness of passing on to the next phase of existence might not be happy, but sure can make some cool magical items out of them, can't you? Okay, but what's the interesting part about artifacts is the plot. My favorite part is the crazy assholes who are chasing after them. Sauron, Vilgax, Thanos. All iconic, sometimes cool villains. You have impactful creators, you have previous wielders or other users of the artifact. The story and the history of the artifact. Don't be afraid about the fact that introducing true power in the hands of people who decided to roleplay peeing off the side of a tavern and rolling to check to see if they hit their mark. Yeah, okay, honestly, you should probably be concerned about that. If you're worried about tonal consistency, you should probably address that at session 0 in the following ways of, hey party of wonderful prospective players and Steve, I am wanting to run a campaign that revolves around the possession of a powerful magical artifact that, for the sake of the story, your party will be in possession of. I need to ensure that we're all prepared to tackle the themes of great power and responsibility, and that you all won't let Steve become a murder hobo hungry for powers to control the universe. Again, basically, it boils down to the quote from our resident mystic Arts.
Stop being afraid and try it. This is just a game about goblins and dragons, and you can play a perfectly balanced game on your gaming console or Steam account. This is an RPG. Make it be a little bit stupid and see how much joy that's going to bring to your players. How much terror it brings them when the bad guys use the powerful items too. Wars should be fought over artifacts. They are the nuclear weapons of the fantasy world.
With that, I think I want to let you all free. I plan on creating at least one artifact for world building for my Patreon, and since it's linked in the video, it'll be free 99, but if you've made it this far, please do all the YouTube things, support if you're able by becoming a YouTube member or Patreon, but until next time, my dearest adventurers, thanks, and thanks again for watching. Magpie responsibly.